welcome. Greetings from my kitchen. We thank you once again for tuning in to this session of the Media Literacy Discussion Club. Don't be a stranger. Please let us know what you think about this program by liking it or leaving a comment. To join our other AMC online programs, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check updates on amc.ru, and follow us on social media to learn, connect, and produce together. So today's presentation is called, I think it's a somewhat pragmatic presentation. Hopefully it's something that you can easily take something away from it, hopefully. I titled it, Why People Don't Trust the Media and What You Can Do to Trust It More. Once again, I'm Joe Crescente. I'm the Media Literacy Fellow. So, changing the slide, this is kind of where the idea for this presentation came from. A couple of days ago, someone wrote to me, and they said that, I don't know what to believe anymore. They keep saying different things. Changing the slide. The they here they were referring to was the media. This person was frustrated that the information landscape was so unclear, and they revealed a great distrust of the media and didn't know where to turn to and what they should believe. And unfortunately, changing the slide, this kind of disorientation is very common these days. Changing the slide. What are the reasons people don't trust the media? Well, there are many. Changing the slide. A research article by Professor David A. Jones from James Madison University back in 2004 found, however, that declining journalistic standards was not one of them. Changing the slide. Here are some of the reasons and factors that people have given for not trusting the media, and we'll go over some of them in a little bit more detail. Confirmation bias, filter bubbles, post-truth era that some have suggested that we live in, regular old bias, polarization, generation gaps, declining trust globally in institutions, and a confusing media landscape. Okay, changing the slide. What is confirmation bias? Just to go over some of these, if you've watched every single seminar or live stream I've ever done, I almost always bring this term up, but it's one you should have in your back pocket because it explains a lot about how social media works, about why people don't trust the media or think they don't trust the media, why your friend or your relative may have very different facts than you do and believe them very passionately, whereas you believe yours maybe very passionately. So confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, to interpret, to favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. It occurs from the direct influence of desire on beliefs. I want this to be true, so it's true. Another way to put it, changing the slide, it's when somebody thinks they have the key to secret information and everyone else is wrong. It's something we're seeing quite a lot of recently. Changing the slide. Another reason why there's this mistrust with the media these days is due to filter bubbles. This is a very academic-y kind of definition here, and then we'll have a little bit kind of like a journalist explain how this works. So filter bubble, an academic definition is a state of intellectual isolation that allegedly can result from personalized searches when a website algorithm selectively guesses what information a user would like to see based on information about the user, such as location, past click behavior, and search history. So in the technical sense of the word, filter bubble is basically because you searched for certain things and you search for certain things quite frequently, the website algorithms, whatever search engines you're using, start pushing you towards that information. It's not like they're independent arbiters. They are biased towards you finding what you like. they're biased towards you finding your comfort food, right? They're trying to help you get to your gravy fries. Sorry for the analogy. Changing the slide, Kevin Morita, the former managing editor of the Washington Post, says that I think readers are, they're living in a world now where they can go find whatever will confirm their bias. If the Washington Post doesn't report, insert any issue, COVID-19, sports, other issues of local, national, international significance. The way they want it reported, they can go to a place that feeds their ideology, that feeds their view of the world. And those sites exist. That's why they're in business. So we live in a world where, let's say you read a mainstream form of news, such as the Washington Post, and they don't report about the issue you want to know about the way you want to. You can go and find a news outlet that reports issues the way you want to. That's not going to challenge you. That's going to present things in a way that confirms your anger, your emotions, whatever it is you're looking for in the media. You can find it, And I think that Morita would argue that this is not necessarily a good thing when especially when you do this all the time. It's one thing when you have a certain issue and you want to kind of scratch that itch and look at something exactly that confirm the way you believe about something. But when you're using it all the time, this can kind of distort your reality, right? It can give you a very skewed version. It's as if like you're reading yourself over and over again to convince yourself this is how things are, because you can go out and find the opinions you already hold in print form, digital form out there. The media landscape is very diversified these days. Skipping ahead to the next slide, the post-truth era. The post-truth is a philosophical and political concept for the disappearance of shared objective standards for truth. In naming it the word of the year in 2016, the Oxford Dictionary defined it as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief, right? It's this idea that we all have our own truths, we all have our own facts. If I don't like your facts, I can get by my own facts, and so on and so forth, which objective truth, takes a back seat to emotions and personal beliefs and opinions. Even if you look at some of the mainstream, the most widely read, well-respected mainstream publications, there's definitely more content these days that is opinion-based, right? It's labeled as such if it's a good publication, right? There's a news sections, plural, and there are some opinion sections, but the opinion section is getting a lot more. It's getting a little bit more prominent display on news websites these days than it did before. If you compared, the New York Times, I don't think they would ever have opinion pieces on the front page, and yet, you can get a lot today if you go on their website. You can definitely find a lot of opinion-related pieces quite high up on their page. You don't have to scroll down very far. You don't have to search for it. It used to be something you would read after you've read kind of maybe objective-leaning, fact-checked, kind of articles first. You'd read those first, and then you'd read the opinion to kind of deepen, kind of strengthen or deepen what you've learned already. But now a lot of people are going straight to the opinion. This is something that's a bit problematic, I think. Searching for opinion, often that relates or confirms what you already believe before you actually read a sourced story where a journalist has gone into the field and asked questions of different experts and compiled this in a way that makes for compelling reading. Rather than looking at that first to kind of get a good sense of the landscape, oftentimes people are going straight in for opinion pieces written by somebody who may or may not, even have the credentials to necessarily be an expert in that field. or watching, cable news television, which is full of pundits, that run the gamut in terms of expertise. But often, what they're stating is, their opinion. They want to win the arguments. They want to have prominence. In the same way, the social media, is full of people trying to create their brands, trying to be relevant. It doesn't mean that they're experts in their field. It doesn't mean that these are the people you should go to first to find out information about, especially about a breaking news event or even one that's ongoing. Changing the slide. So some other factors: bias. We'll talk about this in a second. Polarization. This idea that there's sides in society. In the United States, they often talk about polarization. There's people, on the right and on the left, and there's nothing. The center isn't there anymore politically. So you have people on different sides, and they can't agree, and they can't compromise, and they can't make decisions. And this plays out from the political sphere into the media sphere, where the media starts at some levels kind of tailoring messages or tailoring their publications towards one or other sides of the polarization spectrum rather than reporting for everyone. Or at least that's the belief a lot of people have. Generation gaps. There's definitely a different way that older people, middle-aged people like myself, I can admit that, and younger people, get information and what they believe and what they have. And definitely, when I talk to somebody much older and much younger than me, we interpret stories very differently. It's because we're going to different places. We have different standards for what we're looking for. We have different things we find important and newsworthy, and so on and so forth. But this is really playing out because the media landscape has changed so much in the last 20, 30 years that you have people of my parents' age who read newspapers and watch news on television. Whereas somebody like me, I get my news from the internet, but having a background in communications and stuff, and having worked as a journalist and editor for a long period of time, I feel like I have a decent somewhere between reading the newspapers. I still look at the sites just online, and then younger generations. It's I'm not trying to say that older generations do this, and middle generations do this, and younger generations do this. But there are some similarities, and younger generations get their news in different ways. They might get some more of it from YouTube or in video format, or social media, looking first for information. I certainly look to social media, especially in breaking news events to get information, and then I try to follow that up by looking at good sources of information, because you can follow journalists, for example, on social media, and they can kind of point you in the direction of what might be interesting or what some things you might miss otherwise. But there's definitely different ways that different generations look at the media, and when a younger person talks to an older person, sometimes you look at each other like, are we consuming the same information and the same media? And the answer is, frankly, probably not. And this can somehow lead to distrust. Where you have weird information and I have right information, or vice versa. And this can also lead to some level of mistrust. Declining trust globally in institutions. I mean, the WHO, it's a long, well-respected organization, and I can't say that they're getting all the spotlight all the time for everything that's reported out there these days. And this speaks to this idea that there is this declining trust, and confusing media landscape, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. Why do we think we know better? Right? I'm not saying that you necessarily believe this, but definitely you've encountered this probably recently of somebody who thinks they've got the answers. They know what we should be, they know what we should be doing. We shouldn't be doing this, something about the self-isolation. We should be doing this, or, business should be doing this, or governments should be doing this, et cetera, et cetera. But why, would you argue with a surgeon about to do an operation and say that you know better? Changing the slide. if you cut through the noise, if you blast through the noise, and talk to or listen to the people on the front lines, these days, talking about COVID-19 in particular, they're all quite in unison and quite conservative, about the dangers of this virus. And by conservative, I mean cautious. They're quite cautious. They generally want to take things a little bit slower than other actors who have different kind of goals. Experts in infectious diseases have a certain role, right? But the thing is, if an expert or somebody on the front line is drowned out, and when they are one of 10 voices you hear, and you treat all of these voices equally, despite varying qualifications, you can get quite a blurry picture in which you say, I don't know what to believe anymore. They keep saying different things, right? If an expert is only 10% of the message that you're getting, and the other 90% is made up of people shouting, people, with different interests, trying to, get in there and have their influence. And the actual expert, the one who understands the problem the best, is only 10% of that message. You're going to think, I don't know what to believe anymore. They keep saying different things. Well, the experts actually are not, but the message, the media landscape is so skewed that you can easily come away these days, after a day of media consumption, believing that everybody's saying different things and there's no one way to look at this. Changing the slide, but this mistrust, can certainly have its consequences, and I'm going to give you kind of a sad example here. The New York Times wrote about one case like this in an article just 3 days ago, called "The Beloved Bar Owner Was Skeptical About the Virus, Then He Took a Cruise." This is Joe Joyce and his wife. I think this was only about a month ago. And Joe Joyce, changing the slide, owned a bar in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, New York City, and ran it for 43 years. Very social guy, ordinary guy. Bar thrived because it catered to everybody and didn't change, depending on the trends of the season. Just stuck to, what was, good old school stuff, right? He was able to, he did quite well though. It was a successful business. He was able to send his children to Ivy League universities, and was able to acquire a summer house in New Hampshire. He was a pretty conservative guy, but everybody was welcome at his bar, and he was always ready to help out in his community. Changing his slide. But Joe was skeptical of the media. He thought, why should I believe that a plague was coming? Changing a slide. So this is a quote from the article. On March 1st, Joe Joyce and his wife Jane set sail for Spain on a cruise, flying first to Florida. His adult children suggested that the impending doom of the coronavirus made this a bad idea. Joe Joyce was 74, non-smoker, healthy. 4 years after he opened his bar, he stopped drinking completely. 39 years ago, he didn't see the problem. Changing the slide, his daughter said he watched Fox News, and believed it was under control. And initially Fox, Joe's station of choice, was skeptical of COVID-19 as well. But eventually Fox changed course and took the virus more seriously. But by then, the Joyces were long gone. This reflects a lot of things that were going on. I think a lot of people, if we go back 2-3 months ago, we were a little bit skeptical and have come to take this virus much more seriously as time has gone on. On March 14th, they returned to New York from Barcelona and headed to their house in New Hampshire. Their children were checking in from New York and New Jersey, and on March 27th, when Kristen got off the phone with her father, she called an ambulance. He was wheezing. His oxygen level turned out to be dangerously low 70%. And on April 9th, he died of COVID-19. And the following day, one of his longtime bartenders, J.J. Bubbles, that's the name of his bar, was also in his 70s, died of the virus as well. Changing the slide. When he began to feel sick, when Joe began to feel sick, he resisted getting tested. His daughter said he didn't think he could have it because he wasn't 100% confident that it was a thing, that it was real, essentially. 7 days before he was admitted to the hospital, Joe and Kristen had an argument about the emerging public health crisis, which Kristen described as the only dispute she ever had with her father that she wished she hadn't won. He said, "Don't you think this is fishy, suspicious? Do you know anyone who has it? Do you know anyone who has died from it?" And I said to daughter, "Dad, I don't know anyone now, but give me a week and I bet I will." So, it's an unfortunate and sad kind of example of how the deep biases we have, and when we distrust media, this can have some serious consequences. As I've talked in the last month, there's all sorts of information that's floating out there. There are some people who don't agree with taking a strict stance on things, but I go to, I would personally, I have a lot of family members who, and friends, etc., who, don't have, are older or don't have the greatest health, and I'm okay with being a conservative right now, I'm willing to listen to the experts, to the disease specialists, to what they have to say, what state institutions have to say. I can handle it. I could stay at home for a couple of months, but I also probably, I read a lot of different kinds of media, and I never was going to be very resistant towards it anyway, because, I know, I know what's good information and I know what's not so good information. Unfortunately, Joe Joyce, it was a little too late before he started, really became clear that his confirmation biases and, was going to have deadly consequences. So changing the slide, I think media literate people have it a little bit easier these days. They have sources they probably trust. They understand the role of the media, both historically and at the current time. They know how to fact check, and they can spot fake news and bad sources and questionable publications from a mile away. Changing the slide. But let's remember, right? Journalists are not historians. I see sometimes people stating, well, and it turned out the next day that it was completely different. What was that journalist doing? But the journalists have a very different role. A historian has the benefit of time. Journalist does not. Right? The historian looks back 25, 30 years later at an event. They read entire books that other people have already written about it. They compare, they look through different archives and different sources. They do interviews slowly. They sit, they think. They spend a lot of time in libraries and in their office thinking about this stuff, talking to people, talking to other experts, talking to other scholars about this, and really having a debate about it. A journalist has like 2 hours to get that thing online. They try to interpret for specific audiences, extremely fast, what scientists, economists, politicians, and others are telling them, and they're human, and they make mistakes. I don't think any other profession gets like, canceled, or this idea that they could just they're not doing their job if it occasionally makes an error, right? A journalist can make one error, or a publication can make an error, and all of a sudden, the entire news media landscape is fake news. I don't think if your accountant made one small error, you'd be like, well, accountants, they're all fake. They all don't know what they're doing. But this plays into this distrust of media, that's fairly prevalent in the world at the current moment. Changing the slide. I think the main thing is, for you as a media literate person, right, to get to know, to understand the media better, et cetera, is your main task. Tell good information from bad information, right? And then try to consume more of that good information as you can. Knowing that this source, this publication does this kind of reporting, even has this kind of bias, or has a track record of good reporting in emergency situations. This is most of what you need, right? To understand a publication, to understand its purpose, what kind of reporting it does, And especially in a situation like this, having a few trusted publications, that you can trust to follow the news, will help you and make you, make better decisions and be a better media consumer at this time. Changing the slide. The journalist Greta Kauffman, in an article in 2016, showed that trust in media in the United States was rapidly declining. But this wasn't the first time that this had happened. There was a similar dip in the 1920s and 1930s, but it rebounded after World War II. It's always good, although I did just separate journalists from historians, historians are very important, journalists are very important, but it's good to know history. It's good to see that, this is not the first time, because this gives me hope. I think a lot of people are like, oh, we're in this fake news era, we're in this post-truth era, we're doomed. But I think there's hope. I think there's hope that we, there was a period of a couple decades last century, challenging times, and things were able to get reversed. Just like a few years ago, people were like, oh, fake news. Everybody treated it like it was the brand new thing, as if people haven't been lying since they were first able to open their mouths or, put something on a printing press. Fake news has been around forever. These are, and people, there is some level of, misleading information in any area you look at. But this is, maybe is a particularly acute time. But I have hope, that, this mistrust, this trust can be regained, hopefully. And I think it's going to take a lot, and the responsibility definitely does not only fall on the media, although, a good share of it does, to be more transparent in its reporting, to do a better job, in certain areas. First off, though, I do argue that, journalists are doing, on the whole, for the most part, are doing a good job. But there are, certain actors can bring it down. And to think more about what an audience needs rather than clicks, for sure. But a lot of the share of the burden, the responsibility, falls on ordinary people demanding good quality news reporting, and paying for it and supporting it and requiring it, rather than just doing the lazy thing and clicking on articles about entertainment and so on and so forth. The media reacts. Media is a business, and it reacts to what people want. But I think media. I've never heard it said otherwise. If people were interested in reading hard reporting, then that's what media organizations will do. Deep kind of dives into stuff rather than clickbait kind of stuff. So anyway, changing the slide. Kauffman cites Jonathan M. Ladd in this article, the author of Why Americans Hate the Media and How It Matters. Ladd says that people go into their news feed or turn on the TV, and they're getting information from a wide array of sources, and some of them are less than reputable. It contributes to the sense that all media is untrustworthy, right? Back to the, there's the expert and then the other 9 voices you're hearing. Kind of example I gave 10 minutes ago. When you treat every source as identical in value, then it can lead to a very skewed kind of reality, right? If you think that because some of the media is untrustworthy, therefore all of it's untrustworthy, then I don't know how to help you. You have to recognize this is good information and this is bad information, and they are not equal. They're not equal. Journalists are not equal, in terms of stature, in terms of the hard work put into it. Publications are not equal. Definitely experts are not equal. Information is not equal, and so on and so forth. It is up to you to want to trust the media and to do the work necessary to be a media literate person, to support good media where it exists, and to get rid of and not spread around this garbage, for lack of a better word, that is out there in huge numbers, spreading through WhatsApp, spreading through social media, and so on and so forth. Changing the slide. Ladd says that one thing that has led to further distrust is that prominent journalists have revealed, in recent years in particular, have revealed their biases. This transparency, while jarring if you've always assumed media to be value-free and neutral, can actually be a good thing, in my opinion. The more you know about the people that are doing your reporting, the more you can understand their point of view, how they might look at things, the lens with which they're doing their analysis, why a certain story might be more important to them, or why certain kinds of facts, might rise to the top more than others. Knowing your journalists and your publications is like the number one of the top things you can do to be a media literate person. Knowing who you're reading, right? You can't say you value nutrition if you eat mystery meat, right? If you eat something you don't know where it came from, what it's made of, right? The same goes for media, right? You should know who it is you're reading, get to know them well. And I'm going to harp on this point a few more times before this presentation is over. Changing the slide. People tend to mistrust what they don't understand, but if you can understand a journalist or a publication's bias, or your relative, who you're arguing with, and you can't, at the dinner table, on the holidays, then you have tools for analysis that can help you make choices. Changing the slide. Objectivity is important, but no piece of journalism is 100% neutral. I think not that long ago, people really believed that this was true, that good journalism is 100% neutral. But journalism isn't made by AI, artificial intelligence kind of robot, to take all the human elements out of reporting, right? Journalists are humans. They have, they're educated in certain places. They come up in certain cultures. They have certain experiences that inform everything they do. And that goes for the editors, that goes for the owners of publications, and so on and so forth. It is a little naive to think that there's any piece of journalism out there that's 100% neutral. Objectivity and neutrality as well are not the same thing. To be objective is to try to see the story for what it is, and through a certain lens that tries to minimize the amount of preferences and biases that go into things. But biases slip in, and biases are natural. Which is why I think it's important to know the biases of your journalists so that you can understand maybe the little spin they're putting on things that they may be conscious of, they may be unconscious of. But you can figure this out. This is information you can figure out. You can figure out what the New York Times is all about. You can figure out what any kind of publication is all about. If you read a journalist 10 times, you can kind of get an idea of what they think is important, and if that information that they provide is a priority for you, get to know them well. That would be my advice. So going forward, next slide, I'm much more suspicious of journalists or publications that claim neutrality or something equivalent, when in fact they're hiding their biases. Put your biases on the table. I think when somebody tries to say, well, I'm neutral, I don't have biases, there's an agenda there still. Just let me know what it is, and then I can make my choices. I can say, all right, well, I take that into account that you have this point of view, although some of your information is quite useful for me. I think also one problem is, and I'm asked, the most frequent question I've been asked as somebody who's a specialist in media literacy is, can you tell me a good source or two that I can look at? And it just doesn't work that way. Media literacy is personal. You have priorities, you have needs for information, and you have to put in the time to develop relationships with publications, with journalists, so that you get to know what they're all about, and put them to work for you, so to speak. I'm much more comfortable, knowing a bias. And anyway, I can't just give you, a source or two, because I don't know if you're going to trust that source. If you're not going to put in the time to get to know that source anyway, it doesn't matter. People want a quick, easy answer. Give me the 100% neutral source, so I don't have to do any thinking. But just the thing is, Media literacy is all about thinking. It's about critical thinking. It's about making decisions about what information is a priority for you and who you can trust so that you get that information in an accurate way. Moving forward, next slide. Rather than being disappointed that a journalist or a publication possesses bias, perhaps it's best to ask, are they being fair? I think that is a much more productive way to look at things. Changing the slide. So what does fairness look like? These and other questions can be asked to help you understand good reporting and also to help you get to know publications and journalists. So here's a few questions to ask yourself, or themes or topics to think about when you're trying to build a relationship with journalists and publications. Fairness and impartiality. Is the journalist being fair to the subject at hand? Or can you detect opinion in place of fact, even in isolated instances? Do you feel that the journalist is taking sides, right? That's a good question. See, if you're trying to, like I said, bias exists in every single human out there. Points of view are something that we have. But if you feel that a journalist is definitely taking sides, trying to score points or something, that might not be the most fair and impartial journalist out there. Good journalists can keep their biases in check. If you feel that, to some degree, if you feel that they're not doing that, then maybe this is not a good source of information. Accuracy. Accuracy is something that gives it away for me too, right? If you're looking for a good source of information, if a publication doesn't take accuracy, seriously, then that would make me question, that's a good source of information. So if you see even the smallest, the tiniest of errors, such as a misspelled name, it should make you wonder what else is inaccurate. Was the reporting sloppy on this particular article, or was the deadline intense, or do you notice a pattern within this publication in particular? Accuracy helps me build trust, right? One mistake should not destroy a publication's reputation or journalist's reputation. But if it's a part of a series of overall carelessness, this should cause you to pause and doubt. Okay, changing the slide. Completeness. Ask yourself, is there enough information in the article or post for a consumer to feel informed? And if not, why is that? I heard somebody, is it a comment or is it a question? Let me see. Yes, thank you, Tatiana. It's good to see you here. Yeah, you can shape ideas in different ways. You should have an ability to read between the lines and critically as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, back to presentation. So transparency. Do you feel that the journalist is hiding something? Most times, skepticism of a lack of transparency comes up around sources. Are they giving us all the information necessary about a source, or is the information provided vague? Right? It doesn't necessarily involve lying, but more often covering something up, like providing incomplete info for a source who's often not nearly as important to qualify to answer a question as they're made out to be. Transparency, right? I am in favor of publications that make transparency a priority. And what that means is, if somebody's name can't be mentioned, I want a reason for it. So and so wouldn't give their last name because they were afraid of, they were going to get fired, or the consequences of this. Okay, I'd rather have that than not have any information, right? At least you're telling me there's a risk for the person who was interviewed, and I am pointing out that there was a risk there. Or if a source in this ministry, okay, that might be the case, but I'd rather know a source in the ministry who refused to go on the record because they were afraid of the consequences, right? If possible, I want a publication and a journalist to tell me everything they know. I want them to respect me, and show me the respect by, knowing that I'm not a stupid person, and I demand to know as much information as possible because I want to believe in you, and I want to believe in, media, and the more, ropes you give me to believe in you and to trust media, the easier this is going to be, and the more that this is going to have a positive impact, in society, I think. Going forward, respect. Is the journalist showing as much respect to the sources and material as is appropriate and necessary, right? So it's a really skeptical thing if you see somebody like making fun of, or, there's opinion pieces and then there's news. But in a news article, if you feel like they're making jokes in the article, you ask yourself, is the journalist showing as much respect to the sources and the material as is appropriate and necessary? There are different instances for sure. There are certain weird stories, human interest stories that can happen, where it might be appropriate to show some level of, play. But, if it's a serious story, ask yourself, are they showing enough respect to the material and sources? Changing the slide, diversity of sources. Are they asking different kinds of people? Or are they asking the same kinds of people over and over again to comment on a breaking story, newsworthy topic? When I see a journalist talking to the same person over and over again, I lose trust. I lose faith that they're going out there and doing their job of searching for the best person. Not the easiest person, but the best person to answer this question. And if they can't get to that person, I want to know about that. 3 attempts were made to contact this person's office, but they were unable to give a comment. I'd rather have that than just leaving it out. It doesn't. A good journalist would know that doesn't mean that they're a failure. It means that they are acknowledging that they have deadlines, and they tried their best, and they're showing that they tried their best, and they trust you, the reader, the consumer of media, enough to know that you'll accept that. If you're reading them over and over again, you see that most of the time they're able to have great results. You're going to trust them in a moment like that, especially if they tell you, we tried, we weren't successful this time. All right, moving on. Confusing media landscape. Back to what we were talking about a little bit before. We don't know where we're getting information from a lot of the time. And sometimes we don't know the difference between journalists and, everybody else that's commenting all the time. I don't mean necessarily we don't know the difference if we stopped and thought about it. But we're bombarded by so much information that at the end of the day, you're at the dinner table and you've read 20, let's say you've read 10, 20 things, some of it on social media, some of it in public, different websites. At the end of the day, you're like, oh, what did you hear about X? You're like, oh, they say that, because everything just becomes a composite to you, rather than sitting there and saying, well, this journalist, who I've been reading for a year says this, and this other journalist who I've been reading for a shorter period of time, but seems good, says this. And then drawing your own conclusion. And I say, well, I think based on reading all these things, blah, blah, blah. No, people are often just taking, 10 very quick hot takes that they've seen and conflating that into one opinion as if it's the opinion out there, or, treating a respected journalist and a social media influencer as being the same level of, deserving of the same level of respect, when the difference could be quite stark between them. Changing the slide. I saw this on Twitter today. It made me laugh a little bit. COVID experts who had pivoted to oil expertise now have pivoted to North Korea. Just like, people jump, people on social media just jump from one thing to another thing to another thing. They have expertise on geopolitical politics and oil and, infectious diseases, and it depends on the moment what's most important. Let's get it out there. Let's be, let's be influencers. Let's build our brands. No. The problem is, people are out there on social media all the time, trying to build some kind of professional something out of it, and it's not always as journalists. Leave the reporting in particular to them. There are also good analysts out there. That's a separate topic. Anyway, moving forward. There are experts everywhere on your social media feeds, on television news, in WhatsApp, shared messages, changing the slide. But not all experts are created equally. A journalist is not equivalent to a political commentator, nor a celebrity, nor your friend Sam. Sorry, Sam, for singling you out. Journalists have specialized education and set of skills, and when they do their jobs well, which is most of the time, it shows. You can really tell the difference. But if journalists, are only 10% of the media that you're reading, then you're also going to have a very skewed, view. I mean, how are you going to be able to say, it seems like this is the case when journalist is competing for, attention with a social media influencer, your friend Sam, some hack political commentator, a celebrity, a politician who's trying to get back into the ring, an athlete. I don't know. When the journalist is only 1/10 of the sources you're looking at, it's very hard. I think this is where things used to be a little easier. You had the people you knew in real life, and you had the media, and the media was newspapers and television, essentially. Not to say, I'm not saying that it's not great that we have all these different kinds of media these days, but people who investigate, ask questions, do interviews for a living aren't getting as much of the attention share as they used to. It's a good place to start for information before you move on to that conversation with your friend Sam or listening to your favorite celebrity have a rant on Instagram. Changing the slide. I recommend trying to weed out to the best of your abilities. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel like that person who I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, there's so much out there, I don't know what to believe. If you feel like that, then I recommend try to weed out commentators of all sorts and try listening to journalists and real experts. If you want to find out about COVID-19, listen to infectious disease experts and award-winning journalists with long and proven track records, right? You wouldn't listen to somebody, you wouldn't consider an investment expert and your friend Sam to have the same qualifications. Don't do this with where you get your sources of information from about COVID-19 or about anything else. Changing the slide. So much of media mistrust, I think, it's my opinion here, is self-inflicted. We often have poor hygiene, when consuming the news. Not all media is equal. Seek out trusted sources, and if you don't have trusted sources you can rely on, you should make it your goal to get to know media better. It's one thing to just push, say, well, that's fake, media's all fake news. And then what? Then the situation never improves. But if you take a more active approach towards media and say, all right, this year my resolution is to understand all the source of information I look at all the time, who owns it, what their point of view is, kind of stories they report on, who their journalists are, and so on. What are they known for? And get 3 or 4 places that you're going to be surprised at how much more you start to see what journalists and editors and media publications do and understand where they're coming from and how reporting happens. I understand that not everybody has the education that somebody like me or other or journalists have had. But you can do a lot for yourself by seeking out trusted sources and getting to know, building relationships with different media sources. It's not a good idea to say the media is not trustworthy and lump all media publications together. They are not all the same. And saying, something like, oh, it's all fake news, that doesn't do anybody good, anything. So changing the slide. So as I've said it, right, build a relationship. What you can do, build a relationship with your media. Get to know it. Check its quality. Read journalists a lot to build trust. Make sure it's the information that you need. Remember, not all research is equal. There are a lot of people at home these days putting together graphs, stats, etc., on everything imaginable. Whatever you want, you can find it. Remember, not all research is equal. Just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's worth listening to, right? Changing the slide. Media literacy is personal. Moments like these, such as the one now, we're all at home, they're real tests to figure out, what's a priority for you. Try to the best of your ability to fact check the information that you really need so that you can feel confident in the decisions that you're making. Quick reminder, stay diligent and skeptical. Fact check. Encourage others to fact check. And closing words, which I used a couple weeks ago, and I'll use it again. It's from April 4th. It's timeless advice. It says, «Не будьте такими, особенно сейчас, становитесь ответственными медиа потребителями». It's editor and journalist Alexei Kovalyov. And what it says in English, for those who don't read Russian, don't be just like everyone else, especially now. Become responsible media consumers. And on that, I will end. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? I just heard some comment come through, so let's see what it is. Yes, Tatiana. Journalism is about hype and sound bites today in a lot of ways, and we are overloaded with information. Yes. At the same time, it is our responsibility to take control, right? To have good media hygiene, to take responsibility for what we're consuming. We can't just wait for media to become perfect. Media is following us and what we want out of it, right? It's a business. If we want good journalism, and make it a point to they will change along with us. If we want celebrity commentary all the time, they'll give us that. It's up to us to eliminate to the best of our abilities the kind of bad information and promote the good information that we can find. Promote good sources. Investigate publications. Get to know them as best as possible. Build relationships with media so that you can trust it. Looks like there's a question coming in. It's quite a challenge to be selective. It is. But we don't have any other choice, do we? I recommend, like I said, cut out the commentators to the best of your ability, right? Cut out all this noise, all of these people trying to say, just maybe it involves doing a digital media, social media detox of some kind, and just sticking 5 kind of different but trusted media sources. Just using that, The problem is, our opinions really, we're not decision makers right now. At this point, it's maybe a good time. Follow the news, I guess, can be a little bit, stressful for sure. It's not a lot of great news out there in the world at the moment. Read books, books that are a little bit older, with a little bit of wisdom. It's not a bad time to do that for sure. So Anna Lushina says, thank you for listening, Anna. A question from Grapefruit Orange. Have you ever consciously changed your biases or know someone who has? Well, I don't know if it's a conscious thing, right? But, I've definitely gotten more education and changed my views on things and started to see things from different perspectives, for sure. And as a result, that changed how I looked at stuff, how I analyzed stuff. That's probably the best way I could answer it. Sure, people change, and it usually happens through education, whether that's reading books, taking courses, getting a degree, spending more time, with stuff. But it is possible. Change is very possible. And if there's anything I wanted to say is that, it is possible to go from a position of complete mistrust to something more manageable, to something, where you can at least don't feel completely lost when you're looking at the media. I think that's easily achievable. And as for the stuff with this mistrust comes in waves. So that gives me hope that if we, both publications as well as individual media consumers, practice better media hygiene, that changes in the media landscape are possible, for sure. And it looks like something else is coming in. Yeah, no, for sure. So Tatiana says, I guess people like being confused. It's a good springboard for discussions. Yeah, there's a different thing to sitting around the kitchen table, or, well, these days, I guess, going on Zoom and having a virtual cocktail party with your friends all over the place. There's one thing between sitting around and talking about stuff, and there's another thing when it starts kind of warping how you see the world in some ways, right? When it can when such a level of mistrust of the media can lead you to make bad decisions. I don't want to go back to the Joe Joyce bartender example, but I think his kids would agree that confirmation bias that he had really led him to maybe not make the best decision, and it had pretty bad consequences. No, obviously people like to be. I think Tatiana. We've had a lot of conversations. People like to be controversial for sure, which is why it's good, especially when you feel like you don't know what to believe anymore. Get rid of all the commentary as best as you can, because that commentary is there to be controversial. It is there to comment and just state things and keep you listening and build their social media followings and make them a brand and an influencer, and give them notoriety that they don't have on their own, and just listen to just tune in to good quality journalism when possible. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you for listening. Any other questions? I have not. So I got a question from DE3. Have you ever heard anything about the Epoch Times? I have not. I'll tell you what I would do. I mean, I don't know what if you're trying to figure out if it's a good source or not. I haven't heard of it. Epoch Times. Truth and tradition, fact-based, unbiased. Well, I'm always a little bit. Yeah. I see that. All right. I'm not gonna do a full, search here, but okay. Now, what do I know about it? By just going to Google the Epoch Times, just looking at the first couple of things here. It says truth and tradition, fact-based, unbiased. Already, so clear fact-based journalism without spin or hidden agendas. Okay, I don't believe that. Now, generally, my instinct, my skepticism has already gone up. If you have to tell me that you don't have a hidden agenda, it makes me want to search for it, to be honest. No, but you shouldn't have to. The more people are loud about, we don't have an agenda, we don't have any bias, we don't have any spin, the more I'm just going to look for it, because I don't believe that could be true. And by looking at, just what it says here on the right, it tells me something about it. Founded in 2000 by John Tang and a group of Chinese Americans associated with the Falun Gong spiritual movement. I'm pretty skeptical that it's a great source of information. I don't know. I haven't looked at it, but the information that I have on this brief look here, doesn't give me a lot of hope. I'll just look at the website really quickly. I mean, it looks like a good website just looking at it. It's organized well. They clearly invest money in it. Well, I'll say this, as somebody who spends a lot of time consuming news, I am a bit skeptical of this website. First off, they call, pretty much everybody in the media has gone to a model of talking about the current virus as COVID-19. They're on the top of their page. They're making clear, they're clearly trying to state the origin of the Wuhan coronavirus. That leads me to believe that's showing their bias, and that's not the same as me telling me that you have a bias. It's showing me that they have a very different take than the rest of the media organizations, kind of around the world. The ones that I trust do, who all, without exception, refer to it as, COVID-19. This seems like it's a very clear bent. It could be anti-China. I don't know. So I'm skeptical, very skeptical of this website. Anybody who claims to be the real truth seeker it's got my skepticism up pretty quickly. Okay, all right. So it was great to talk to everybody today. So to wrap up, we thank you for tuning in for this session of the Media Literacy Discussion Club. Don't be a stranger. Let us know what you thought about this program by liking it or leaving a comment. To join our other AMC online programs, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check updates on our website, amc.ru, and follow us on social media to learn, connect, and produce together. Till next week, I will be back at this time next week with another presentation. I hope you all manage to stay healthy, wash your hands, be good to your neighbors. It's pretty much who we have these days, right? All right, have a good evening.